While cleaning her late mother's apartment, Alyson found an envelope with a letter and a bank card hidden under the linoleum. "My dear girl, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Forgive me for not telling you everything right away." And the moment she finished the letter, she froze, cold all over. Dust clogged her nose and scratched her throat. Alyson wiped her forehead with the back of her hand for what felt like the 100th time and glanced at her fingers, dirty, nail polish chipped, gray grime stuck under her nails. She'd had them done at a salon 3 weeks ago, before her mom's birthday. Back when everything still felt normal. Her mom had laughed at the cake with candles, saying that at 72 candles were silly, but Alyson had seen the shine in her eyes. When was the last time she looked like this? Hair a mess, covered in dust, wearing old jeans and her dad's stretched-out t-shirt she pulled from the closet. Probably 20 years ago, when she helped her mom put up wallpaper in this very kitchen. Or that time she and her dad painted the fence at the dacha, and she ended up covered in green paint from head to toe. "That's it," she said out loud. Her own voice sounded dull in the empty apartment, echoed off the bare walls, and came back strangely warped. "One more piece. That's all for today. I can't do any more." Alyson froze, listening. The apartment was so quiet she could hear water dripping in the bathroom. Drip. 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 She couldn't bring herself to stand up. Her knees ached from crawling on the floor all day. Her back hurt. Her temples throbbed from exhaustion and the stuffy air. The old linoleum with faded daisies peeled off with difficulty. Alyson lifted the edge with a big kitchen knife she found in a drawer. Her father's knife, the wooden handle wrapped with electrical tape where it once cracked. The blade was sharp, well maintained. Her dad always took care of his tools. She hooked the edge of the linoleum, braced one knee against the floor, and pulled. A sharp, unpleasant crackling sound split the silence, like tearing old paper, and a whole sheet of rubber came up, revealing the concrete beneath, gray, uneven, covered in hardened drops of old glue, split with thin cracks. In some places the linoleum stuck so tightly that she had to scrape it off centimeter by centimeter. The smell rising from the floor was old and musty. The smell of time. Alyson closed her eyes and turned away. Dust rose in a cloud, glittering in the evening sunlight coming through the dirty window. Tiny specks floated slowly in the air, settling onto her hair, her clothes, her hands. Her mother's apartment greeted her with silence. That specific, dead silence that exists only in homes where nobody lives anymore. Silence where you can hear every creak of a floorboard, every rustle behind a wall, every beat of your own heart. 7 days had passed since the funeral. Only 7 days. But it felt like a whole lifetime. When Alyson stepped inside that morning, for a split second she imagined her mom would walk out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron and grumbling in her usual tone. "Why didn't you warn me you were coming, honey? I would have baked a pie." But nobody walked out. The apartment stayed quiet. Alyson stood in the hallway, listening to that silence. It smelled just the way her mom's home always smelled: old books, lavender soap tucked into the closets, and something else she could never quite place. The smell of home. The smell of childhood. A scent that now would live only in memory. The entryway was tiny, 5 square meters at most. A narrow coat rack with her mother's coat hanging on it. Old, black, worn at the elbows. Shoes lined up underneath. Her slippers, flattened and gray from years of use. Autumn boots. Winter boots with a zipper that always jammed. Alyson bent down and touched the winter boot. The leather was cold and stiff. She'd have to throw them out, she thought. Who would need them now? Just old things. But she couldn't do it. She simply turned away and walked deeper inside. She had come early in the morning with a firm decision to finally start sorting everything out. Her friend Piper had told her, "Don't drag it out, Alyson. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. You just have to push yourself and do it." Piper was right. It had to be done. But how? Alyson stopped in the hallway and glanced at her mom's floral robe still hanging on the hook. Blue with big white daisies, patch pockets, and a stretched-out elastic belt. Her mom had worn it for the last 5 years, faded at the elbows, sun-bleached, stretched. The belt was so loose that she tied it with an old scarf. It's comfortable, she'd say every time Alyson tried to buy her a new one. Why do I need a new one? This one still works. No reason to throw it away. It didn't last. Hope was gone suddenly, a heart attack in her sleep. The neighbor found her 2 days later, worried that she hadn't come out to buy bread. She called the police, and they broke down the door. Alyson got the call at work. She remembered sitting in a conference room discussing some charts when her phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Alyson Stoner? This is the district police department. You need to come right away. Everything after that felt like a blur. The drive across town. The police car outside the building. Neighbors crowded on the landing. The weary-looking officer. Our condolences. Do you have your ID? You'll need to identify her. Her mom was lying on her bed, in the same nightgown Alyson had last seen her in. She looked peaceful, as if she were just asleep. Her face was calm, without any trace of suffering. The doctor said her heart had stopped instantly, that she hadn't felt pain. It was supposed to be comforting, but somehow it didn't comfort her at all. Alyson wiped away sudden tears. No. Not now. She couldn't fall apart. She needed to work. She needed to get things done. She turned away from the robe and walked into the kitchen. She decided to start here. The kitchen was easier. No personal things, no framed photos, no letters or journals. Just work. Cleaning, scraping, tossing things out. Mechanical tasks that shut her mind off. She stopped on the threshold and scanned the room. About 8 square meters. An old gas stove with enamel burners stained yellow with grease. A sink with a dripping faucet. Wall cabinets once painted white, now yellowed and peeling. A table by the window covered with a checkered plastic cloth. 2 chairs with sagging seats. On the table stood a half-finished cup of tea. Her mom's. Alyson walked over and looked inside. The tea had dried long ago, leaving a dark crust at the bottom. A book lay beside it, a worn detective novel, marked in the middle. Her mom would never know how it ended. Alyson picked up the cup and carried it to the sink. She stood there holding it, staring out the window. Then she suddenly set it on the edge of the sink and turned away. No. Not now. Later. She needed to clean everything else first. The apartment was small. 2 rooms in an old 5-story building on the city's edge, built back in the 60s. Narrow hallways, low ceilings, a combined bathroom. Cold in winter, stuffy in summer. But her mother had loved this place. Her whole life had been here. Hope got the apartment more than 40 years ago, when she married Gerald. They received it through the factory housing program. Her father worked as an engineer at the local machine plant. They got the apartment and signed their marriage papers on the same day. Her mom used to say that they arrived here with 2 suitcases and a bottle of champagne. The place was completely empty. Newly built, bare walls, concrete floors. But to them, it felt like a palace. Alyson had been born here. Well, technically she was born in the hospital, but this was where they brought her from the maternity ward. This was her first room, her first home. She grew up within these walls, learned to walk on these floors, skinned her knees running down this hallway. In the big room stood her parents' bed and her crib. Later the crib was replaced with a couch, then the couch disappeared and the room became just her parents' bedroom. The small room, which had once been her father's office, became her mother's little living room after he died. She put an old armchair there, a bookshelf, a TV. That's where she spent her evenings reading, knitting, watching her shows. Alyson walked through the apartment, peeking into every room. Everything was neat. Her mother had always been meticulous. Every object in its place, not a speck of dust anywhere. Even in dying, she somehow managed to keep things tidy. The bed was made, the dishes washed, the floor swept. Alyson went back to the kitchen and forced herself to work methodically, trying not to think about anything. First, she carried out everything she could remove from the kitchen: old chairs with worn-out seats her dad once reupholstered, the peeling table with only 3 legs, the 4th propped up by a piece of brick, the wall cabinets she unscrewed and took down one by one. She stacked it all in the big room for now, right on the floor. She'd sort it out later. Then she took down the curtains. They had once been blue, now they were a dirty gray, faded, moth-eaten, stained with grease near the corner that hung by the stove. She crumpled them and shoved them into a trash bag. She took off the curtain rod to metal, rusty, paint peeling. She washed the window next, scrubbing the glass with an old rag soaked in vinegar. The glass was cloudy from years of grime, but gradually it grew clearer, letting more light into the kitchen. Then she started on the wallpaper, tearing it off strip by strip. Old wallpaper yellow, covered with tiny flowers, the kind people put up in the 80s. Underneath were pieces of newspapers from the 70s, used for adhesion. Alyson spotted scraps of an article about cosmonauts, a crossword puzzle, furniture sale ads. All of it from another era, another life. By noon she was so tired she could barely stand. Her legs ached, her back burned, her hands trembled. She sat down on the windowsill wide, old, wooden, the paint peeling. She took out a cheese sandwich and a thermos of tea. Piper had shoved them into her hands that morning with the words, "At least eat something decent, otherwise you'll forget again." Alyson sat there chewing, staring out the window. From the 5th floor she could see the whole courtyard. A typical yard for these old neighborhoods, an asphalt square, rusty swings with chipped paint, a crooked sandbox nobody used anymore, garages in the back. Beyond them stood more 5-story buildings, exactly the same gray, identical. Someone across the yard was shaking out a rug. A cloud of dust hung in the air, glowing in the sunlight. Below, an elderly woman with a shopping trolley moved slowly, stopping every few steps. Children were playing, 2 boys racing on bikes, a girl skipping rope. Life went on, as if nothing had happened. "Funny," Alyson muttered, finishing her lukewarm tea, "I grew up here." It was a strange feeling sitting in the apartment where her whole childhood had passed and realizing that soon it would all be gone. Someone else would live here. They'd bring their own furniture, put up their own wallpaper, hang their own curtains. And nothing would remain of her family. No trace. As if they had never existed. Gerald, her dad, had died 10 years ago. Alyson still couldn't fully accept that. 10 years was a long time, yet sometimes she would forget and reach for her phone to call him, to ask for advice or tell him something. And only after dialing his number would she remember there was no one to call. He had been a good mankind, quiet. An engineer at the factory. Made little money, but never let the family feel it. Didn't drink, except maybe a small glass of cognac on holidays. Didn't cheat, didn't gamble, didn't disappear with friends. He came home, had dinner, played with Alyson, watched the news, and went to bed. On weekends he went fishing, tinkered in the garage, helped neighbors fix their cars. He raised Alyson as if she were his whole world because she was. His daughter, his meaning, his joy. He taught her to ride a bike, running behind her holding the seat. Took her to the movies for cartoons, buying her ice cream and popcorn. Helped her with homework, spending hours explaining math. When she cried over a bad grade or over a boy who tugged her braids, he stroked her head and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything passes. All hurts fade." And then one morning he just didn't wake up. His heart. He was only 62, not an age to die. Her mother found him when she went to wake him for work. He was lying peacefully on his side, hand under his cheek, as if asleep, but he wasn't breathing. After his death her mother seemed to age 10 years overnight. She grew quieter, smaller, withdrawn. She often sat by the window, staring at nothing, the courtyard, the buildings across, the clouds. She could sit there for hours, unmoving, silent. Alyson would visit, try to get her out for a walk, to the movies, to see friends. But her mother only shook her head. "Why? I'm fine here." Alyson tried to bring her to live with her. She begged, insisted, they even argued about it. "Stay with me, Mom. You won't be alone. It'll be nicer together." But Hope refused. "Everything I have is here," she'd say, glancing around her tiny apartment. "My whole life. All my memories. Why would I leave? Why do I need strange walls?" And now Alyson stood in the middle of this kitchen, wondering what to do next. The apartment had to be sold. That was clear. She had no choice. She herself rented a one-bedroom on the other side of the city, had loans at 2 banks, and a job that kept her working from dawn till late for a salary barely enough to live on. Her divorce 3 years ago had eaten all her savings. The apartment was split, the rest went to lawyers, rent, starting over. At least this place could bring in some money. She could finally breathe, pay off debts. But to sell it, she had to fix it up first. Throw out the old furniture, redo the wallpaper, replace the linoleum, update the kitchen tiles. At least a minimal cosmetic repair, otherwise she wouldn't get even half the market price. The realtors had already come by, looked around, and given their estimates. They shook their heads and named numbers that made Alyson want to cry. It needs renovation, they said. No one will buy it in this state. Only if the building gets demolished. So she decided to fix it up herself. She didn't have money for contractors anyway. But she had hands. And time. She took 2 weeks of unpaid leave. She'd start with the kitchen, then the rooms, then the bathroom. Step by step. Alyson shook herself out of her thoughts. She finished the last sip of tea, rinsed the thermos, and went back to work. She had to finish the floor while she still had some strength and there was daylight. Tomorrow she wouldn't be able to come work, meetings, reports. She had to at least finish the kitchen today. The linoleum was old and thick, on a felt backing. It had been laid long ago, back when Alyson was a teenager. She remembered that day. It was summer, August, hot. She and her dad laid the linoleum together. Her mom paced around, muttering that they should have called professionals, that they were going to ruin everything, that the floor would be crooked. Her dad just laughed. He rolled the sheet out across the floor, smoothed it with his hands, then took a large knife with a wooden handle and started cutting it to the size of the kitchen. Alyson squatted beside him, holding the edges so the linoleum wouldn't slide. She remembered the smell of rubber and glue, remembered how her dad wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled at her. "It's okay, sweetheart, we've got this. It'll be fine." And it was. The floor turned out smooth and pretty daisies on a brown background. Her mom had picked the pattern herself at the store, wandering between rolls, touching them, comparing. "Daisies are cheerful," she'd said. "It'll feel like a field." How old was this linoleum now? Alyson tried to count. She'd been 14 then. Now she was 45. 31 years. This linoleum had been lying here for more than 30 years, and no one had ever replaced it. It had worn through by the stove, where her mom stood every day cooking. It had thinned by the sink, where she did the dishes, bent over the basin. The edges had cracked and curled, exposing the gray felt underneath. In some spots, holes had appeared, which her mom covered with tape. It should have been replaced ages ago, but her mom kept putting it off. There was never enough money, and later she simply didn't care anymore. "Why bother?" she'd say. "It doesn't matter to me now. I'll live out my days like this." And she did. Alyson knelt in the far corner by the window, away from the door. She decided to start there. The linoleum was more intact in that spot, stepped down better. She slipped the knife under the edge, braced her knee against the floor, and pulled. There was a dry crack, like old bone snapping, and a 30-centimeter strip of rubber began to peel away. The felt backing tore, staying glued to the concrete. Another yank. Dust rose in a column thick, gray, heavy, hanging in the air and making her cough. Alyson started coughing, clamped a hand over her mouth, turned toward the window, and waited for it to settle. She opened the window wider, letting in fresh air. From outside came the sound of cars, children's voices, a dog barking. Then she grabbed the linoleum again. She pulled, pushing her feet into the floor. The linoleum gave way reluctantly, tearing in chunks. Underneath, the gray concrete appeared, covered in hardened drops of glue, water stains, and cracks. The floor was uneven, a bump here, a dip there. Alyson ran her hand over the concrete. Cold, rough, dusty. Another meter. Another half meter. The work was slow but steady. Half the kitchen was already clear. Only the corner by the window remained the farthest, most awkward part. Alyson crawled over on her knees, sat down with her legs stretched out, and took hold of the edge again. Here the linoleum stuck the hardest. Apparently they'd used more glue in this corner. Or maybe people had simply walked there less, and the rubber hadn't worn out. Alyson slid the knife under the edge, pushing the blade under the linoleum and levering it up. It squeaked but wouldn't budge. She leaned harder, putting all her weight into it. There was a sharp sound. Something snapped, and a large piece of linoleum suddenly came away from the floor, throwing up a thick cloud of dust. And that's when she saw something strange. Under the linoleum, right in the corner, on the concrete floor, lay an envelope. An ordinary yellowish postal envelope. Slightly dusty, the edges darkened with age, but intact. It had been pressed there under the rubber, in the very corner where no one could see it or stumble on it by accident. It was there on purpose. Hidden. For years. 4 decades. Alyson froze, unable to move. Her heart started pounding harder, thudding in her temples. Her hands began to shake. Her mouth went dry. What was that? Why was there an envelope here? Who had put it there, and more importantly, when? She reached out slowly, carefully, as if the envelope might vanish if she moved too fast. She pinched the corner between 2 fingers and pulled it out from under the torn linoleum. The envelope was light, almost weightless. Whatever was inside, it wasn't money. The paper was too thin for that. Alyson turned the envelope over in her hands, examining it from all sides. The paper was plain and thick. Nothing was written on the back. On the front, in the middle, in her mother's familiar handwriting, was a single word, Alyson. Nothing else. No dates, no explanations, no return address. Just a name. Her name. A chill ran up the back of her neck, and the hair there seemed to stand on end. Her mother's handwriting, definitely hers. Alyson would recognize it anywhere. Those rounded letters, slanting slightly to the right, the little flourish on the V. That was how her mom wrote notes, shopping lists, greetings, and birthday cards. But the handwriting here looked different, not like it had in recent years, shaky and uneven, smearing from unsteady fingers. This was the writing of a young, steady hand. The hand of someone whose fingers weren't trembling with age. Which meant the envelope had been hidden a long time ago. A very long time ago. Alyson slowly sank down onto the floor, leaning her back against the cold wall, and sat there for several minutes, just holding the envelope and staring at it. Fragments of thoughts flashed through her mind without forming anything solid. Why was the envelope under the floor? Why had her mother hidden it there when they put down the linoleum? Or had she hidden it even earlier and then made sure the linoleum went over it so no one would find it? And why? What could be in this envelope that couldn't just sit in a closet or a drawer? And when, exactly? 30 years ago? Later? Earlier? Alyson remembered that day they laid the linoleum. Her mom had been oddly jumpy. Pacing the kitchen, peeking over her and her dad's shoulders, saying something, distracting them. Then she suddenly went off to the other room and stayed there for a long time. Alyson hadn't thought much of it back then. She figured her mom was just tired of the noise and dust. But maybe it was something else. Maybe her mom had been thinking about the envelope under the old linoleum, worried they'd find it. Or maybe she had hidden it later after the new linoleum was in place, lifting the edge in the corner and sliding the envelope beneath. But why? Her hands were still shaking. Alyson pressed the envelope to her chest and closed her eyes, trying to calm down. Breathe. Just breathe. It's fine. It's only an envelope. Just a letter from Mom. So why did it feel so terrifying? She carefully opened the envelope. The flap hadn't been sealed, just tucked inside. Alyson unfolded it and looked in. There were 2 things inside. The first was a sheet of lined paper, folded in 4. The kind people used to tear out of school notebooks. The edges were uneven, torn. So it really had been ripped out. The second thing was unexpected. A bank card. Alyson took out the card and turned it in her hands. A regular plastic card, green, worn with age. The name on it was embossed, Hope Stoner. And the card number. At the bottom was the issue date. Alyson squinted at it. 2009, 16 years ago. The card had been issued 16 years ago. On the back, right at the bottom, in tiny neat handwriting the same as on the envelope, 4 digits were written. The PIN code. Her mom had written the pen right on the card so she wouldn't forget. Or so Alyson could use it. Alyson set the card on the dirty concrete floor beside her and unfolded the sheet of paper. The handwriting was her mother's, but like on the envelope, younger. The letters were firm and even, without the tremor her hand had in the last years. So the letter had been written long ago. Long ago, but not ancient. If the card was from 2009, then the letter was from around the same time. 16 years ago. Alyson had been 29 then. She was married, living in another city, working. Her dad was still alive. He would die 6 years later. Her mom was healthy, full of energy, not old yet. And back then, 16 years ago, her mother had written this letter, put it in an envelope with the card, and hidden it under the linoleum. Why? Alyson started reading, and the very first lines made her freeze. My dear girl, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm no longer alive. I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything from the start. A chill ran down her spine from the base of her skull to her tailbone. Goosebumps broke out on her arms. There was something wrong, unsettling, terrifying in those words. If I'm no longer alive. Her mother had written this letter knowing Alyson would only read it after her death. Knowing she wouldn't be there to explain, to answer questions, to calm her down. Alyson swallowed the lump in her throat and kept reading. The letters jumped, the lines blurred, but she forced herself to focus. I wanted to tell you the truth many times, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was afraid you wouldn't understand, that you'd hate me, turn away from me. Or maybe I was just a coward. I don't know. It doesn't matter now. But you have to know, because you have the right to know. This is your life, your story, and I had no right to hide it from you. Alyson, Gerald is not your biological father. Alyson stopped breathing. The air stuck somewhere in her chest, refusing to move either in or out. She read the sentence again. And again. And again. The words wouldn't settle in her head, wouldn't come together into meaning. They bounced off each other. Not her dad. How could he not be her dad? What did not your biological father even mean? Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rustled. Alyson sucked in a breath, then another, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Forcing her hands to still. Forcing her eyes to focus on the letters. Read. Just read. He was the best man in the world, and he loved you as if you were his own. Even more than his own, because your own child you love just because they're your blood, but he loved you because he chose you. To him, you were his daughter. His real daughter. His only and beloved child. And I'm grateful to him for that until my last breath. He knew the truth from the very beginning, even before you were born, and still married me, took you in, gave you his last name, and raised you as his own. There aren't people like him anymore. Remember that. Always remember. But your biological father is another man. His name was Tom. Tom Hunt. I met him 6 months before you were born, in February of 1979. I was 22, he was 28. He came to our town for work. He was an art restorer, worked in a museum in New York. He came to us for 2 months to restore old paintings in a local church. Do you remember that church on the edge of town, the one they later demolished? It had a collection of very valuable 18th century paintings that needed urgent restoration because they were falling apart. We met by accident. I was working at the main library then. You know I spent 30 years there. He came looking for books on local history, on the church's history. He needed archives, documents. I helped him find the right books, and we started talking. He was not like our men. Educated, well-read, with kind gray eyes and a soft voice. He talked about painting so beautifully I could listen for hours, even though I didn't know anything about art. He told me how artists painted in the old days, what pigments they used, how they prepared the canvas. He showed me photos of the works he'd restored. His hands were beautiful. Long fingers, always stained with paint. We started seeing each other. In secret. I knew he was married, that he had a wife and a small son in New York. He told me himself on the first day, so I'd know and not fool myself. But I couldn't stop. It was like a sickness, like a spell. For 2 months we met almost every day. We walked around town, sat in cafes, went to the movies. He told me about New York, about museums, about his work. I told him about books, about the library. We were happy. And then he left. The job was done, the paintings restored, and he went back to New York, back to his family. We didn't even say a proper goodbye. He left early in the morning. I woke up and he was already gone. Only a note on the table, "I'm sorry. I couldn't stay." A month later I realized I was pregnant. I didn't try to find him. Why? Why destroy someone else's family? Why burst into his life? He had a wife and child he loved, and I was just a mistake. A weakness. And I was afraid to raise a child on my own. It wasn't like it is now, Alyson. Being an unmarried mother back then was like a sentence. They would have bullied you at school, and I would have been fired. People were cruel, judgmental. I didn't know what to do. And then Gerald showed up. He'd been in love with me since college, waited 4 years, hoping. I didn't love him. At least, not the way I loved Tom. But he was good, reliable, kind. I told him everything, the whole truth. I said I was pregnant by another man. I thought he'd walk away, push me aside, refuse me. But he said he would marry me anyway, that he would raise the child as his own, that he would give the baby his name and his love. And he kept his word. He was a real father to you, Alyson. The only father you ever knew. Remember that. Please, remember. Alyson tore her eyes from the page. Her mind was pure fog, her ears rang. She couldn't string two thoughts together, couldn't understand what she was feeling. Shock? Pain? Anger? Confusion? All of it at once? Dad. Not Dad. Gerald wasn't her father. Some Tom was. An artist from New York. A painting restorer. A man she had never seen, never known, never even suspected existed. And now what? What did this change? Her dad was still her dad, even if they didn't share blood. He had raised her, loved her, taught her to ride a bike, taken her fishing, helped with homework, hugged her when everything was falling apart. What did blood matter compared to that? But her mother had written this letter for a reason. She'd hidden it under the floor for 16 years. That meant there was more. Something important. Something worth keeping secret for a whole lifetime. Alyson looked back down at the paper. The letter went on. Toward the end the handwriting grew less even, the letters larger, shakier. And the next lines made her go cold. She forced herself to keep reading. The letters blurred, but she blinked several times, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and focused on the text again. But that's not all, my girl. I have to tell you something I found out only recently. A few years ago, Tom found me. Alyson froze. What? Found her? When? It happened in 2008. I got a letter in the mail. A normal paper letter in an envelope. I opened it, and inside was a letter from Tom. At first I couldn't believe my eyes. So many years had passed. Almost 30 years. And he found me. Wrote to me. In the letter he said he'd been a widower for 5 years. His wife had died of cancer. That all this time he had been thinking about me, remembering those 2 months we spent together. That he'd found out he might have a daughter by accident, through mutual acquaintances who had seen us together back in '79 and heard the gossip. That he wanted to meet, to talk, to know how my life had turned out. I didn't know what to do. On the one hand, I was curious. How he looked now, how he'd lived all those years, whether he'd been happy. On the other hand, I was afraid. Afraid it would all come back, that old feelings would wake up. And most of all, afraid that you would find out. You were already an adult, independent, with your own life. Why dig up the past? But I answered him anyway. I wrote back and told him about you. That you'd grown up, gone to college, gotten married. I didn't say, of course, that you were his daughter. I wrote that you were Gerald's daughter. I lied. I was so ashamed, but I couldn't do anything else. Tom came a month later. We met at a cafe by the train station. Neutral ground, where none of our acquaintances would see us. I almost didn't recognize him. Old, gray, stooped. But his eyes were the same. Gray, kind, sad. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his life. About his work at the museum, about his son who had become a doctor and was living in Boston, about his wife whom he had loved, but not the way he loved me. He said I had been the only real love of his life, that he'd regretted all his life leaving back then, not staying. And I sat there and cried. Cried because life had passed, because everything could have been different, because we had lost each other. And because I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell him he had a daughter. We met a few more times. In secret, on the sly, like when we were young. Every time I planned to tell him about you, but I couldn't get the words out. I was afraid he would want to meet you, that you would learn everything, that your life would turn upside down. Afraid to destroy the memory of Gerald, who had been a real father to you. And then one day Tom said to me, "Hope, I know." At first I didn't understand what he meant. And then he went on, "I know Alyson is my daughter. I've done the math, all the dates. I saw her picture on your social media page. She looks a lot like me when I was young. She has my nose. My eyes. I know." I don't remember what I answered. I think I just started crying. And he took my hand and said, "I don't want to burst into her life. I don't want to break what you've built. But I want to help. I want to leave her something. Let her find out about me after I'm gone, when she's ready. For now, just let me give her what I never gave her all these years." And he started sending me money. Every month, to the card you found in the envelope. He opened the card in my name, gave me the pen, and asked me to keep the money for you. He said it was his way of taking care of the daughter he didn't know. At first I refused. But he insisted. He said he didn't need that money, that he had a good pension, that his apartment was paid off, that his son was provided for. And you were his daughter, and he had the right to help his daughter. The money came every month, $300 at a time. I didn't touch it, I couldn't. It just sat there on the card, and I didn't know what to do with it. Give it to you? But how would I explain where it came from? Tell you the truth? But how? We kept meeting once a month, sometimes less often. We drank tea in cafes and talked. He told me about his work. He was still restoring paintings, even though he was already over 70. He showed me photos of his projects. He asked about you, how you were, what you were doing, whether you were happy. I told him as much as I could, without giving away that we were seeing each other. And then, 2 years ago, he didn't show up. I waited in the cafe for an hour, then 2. I called his cell, no answer. I texted, no reply. A week later his son, Barry, called me. He'd found my number in his father's contacts. He said his father had died. A heart attack. Suddenly. At home. The funeral had already taken place. I couldn't go to the funeral. What right did I have? To them I was nobody. Just an old acquaintance from the past. I stayed home, locked myself in my room, and cried for 3 days. By then Gerald had already been gone 10 years, and I was completely alone. A month later Barry called me again. He said his father had left a will, and there was a clause in it that concerned me, or rather, you. Tom left you an inheritance. Alyson felt a chill run down her spine. An inheritance? What inheritance? Her hands shook even harder. She pressed the letter to her knees to keep hold of it and went on reading, barely breathing. My girl, Tom had an apartment in New York. A 2-bedroom apartment in an old building in the center of Manhattan, in the Upper West Side neighborhood. He inherited it from his parents. They had lived there since the 40s, after the war. The apartment is old and needs repairs, but it's in a good area, and it's worth a lot of money. Tom left this apartment to you, Alyson. To his daughter, whose existence no one officially knew about, but he knew. In the will he wrote, the apartment at the address, then the address dash, I leave to the daughter of Hope Stoner, Alyson Stoner, born on such and such date. He listed all your data. Your ID details, place of birth, everything. He knew everything about me. He found everything out. Barry was in shock. He called me and asked who Alyson was and why his father had left her the apartment. I didn't know what to say. I lied that you were the daughter of a friend of mine whom Tom had once helped, and he wanted to repay her. I don't know if Barry believed me. But he didn't argue. He said the apartment really was left to you, that the documents were drawn up with a notary, and that you could claim the inheritance within 6 months. I should have told you then. I should have. But I couldn't. I was afraid. Afraid of your reaction, afraid you would hate me for lying. Afraid to destroy your memories of Gerald. He was your dad, your real dad, and I had no right to take that away from you while I was alive. I decided you would learn everything after my death. That then you could decide for yourself, accept the inheritance or not, look for Barry or not, be angry with me or forgive me. On the card you found are the funds Tom transferred to me for you. I never added a cent and never took anything off. This is your money, my girl. Yours by right. I hid the notary documents in the closet in the big room, in the box with winter clothes. There's an envelope there with the notary office seal. The office address is on the envelope. You can go there, show your ID, and they'll give you all the papers. But the most important thing, Alyson, is this, and there you'll find Barry's contact details. Tom's son. Your half-brother. Alyson dropped the letter. It slipped from her shaking fingers and fell to the gray concrete floor, kicking up a tiny cloud of dust. A brother. She had a brother. A half-brother she had never seen, never known about, whose existence she hadn't even suspected. And an apartment. An apartment in New York, in the center, on the Upper West Side. From a man she had never met, who was her biological father. Alyson sat on the cold floor with her back against the wall and couldn't move. Her thoughts rushed around in chaos, refusing to form a clear picture. Too much information. Too much all at once. Too much for one day, one evening, one life. Dad was not Dad. Her father was an artist from New York who had died 2 years ago. Her mother had met him in secret, never told Alyson. He'd known about her, sent money, left her an apartment. And there was a brother, Barry, a doctor in Boston. God. Oh God. What was she supposed to do? What was she supposed to do with all of this? Alyson picked the letter up off the floor and smoothed the crumpled edges. There were still a few lines left. She forced herself to read to the end. My girl, I know this is hard for you. I know you're angry at me, that you feel betrayed. Forgive me. Forgive the lies, the half-truths, the cowardice. I lived my whole life afraid you'd find out, and that fear paralyzed me. But I want you to know this, Gerald loved you. Truly, deeply, unconditionally. He was your father in every sense but the biological one. And nothing can take that away from you. And Tom? Tom loved you too. In his own way. From a distance. He had no right to walk into your life, but he wanted to help, to leave something for you. That apartment, that money, that's his way of saying, I'm sorry I wasn't there. You have every right to accept the inheritance or refuse it. To find Barry or not. To be angry at me, at Tom, at the whole world. That is your right, your choice, your life. I only ask one thing. Forgive me. Not now, not right away. But someday. When the pain fades, when you can look at all this from a distance. Forgive me for being weak, for being afraid, for keeping silent. I have loved you all my life. You were my joy, my happiness, the meaning of everything. Forgive me. Your mom. Alyson finished reading and quietly started to cry. Tears ran down her cheeks and dripped onto the paper, smudging the ink. She sat on the dirty floor, in the dust, in an old t-shirt, in the middle of a wrecked kitchen, and cried. Bitterly, helplessly, in great heaving sobs. She cried for her mother, who had lived her whole life with this heavy secret and never found the courage to share it. She cried for her dad, Gerald, who had taken in someone else's child and loved her as his own. She cried for Tom, whom she would never know, who had died without ever seeing his daughter. She cried for herself. For the fact that life had turned out nothing like she thought. How long did she sit there like that? She didn't know. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe half an hour. The tears slowly ran out, leaving only little hiccuping sobs. Then those stopped too. All that was left was emptiness inside and a strange numbness. Alyson wiped her face with the sleeve of her t-shirt, leaving dirty streaks on her cheeks. She got up from the floor. Her legs were numb and she limped a little. She went to the sink, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water on her face. Once, twice, 3 times. The water was icy, bracing. It washed away her tears, the dust, the grime. Alyson looked at her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Her face was red and swollen, her eyes irritated. She looked awful. She needed to calm down. She needed to get her thoughts in order. She needed to decide what to do next. She went back to where the letter and the card lay. Carefully folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Picked up the card and turned it in her hands. The plastic was cold and smooth. On the back 4 digits. The PIN. How much money was on it? Her mom had written that Tom sent $300 a month. That started. When? 2008, 16 years ago. If he'd sent money right up until his death in 2022, then that meant. Alyson tried to count. 14 years at $300 a month. $3,600 a year. Over $50,000. God. Her hand started shaking again. Alyson shoved the card into the pocket of her jeans, took the envelope, and left the kitchen. She walked into the big room where her mother's bed, wardrobe, and dresser still stood. It was cleaner here. She hadn't started on this room yet. Alyson opened the wardrobe. Her mother's clothes hung inside dresses, sweaters, skirts. It smelled of lavender and mothballs. Boxes were stacked on the top shelf. Alyson rose up on her toes and pulled one box down. Opened it. Winter hats, scarves, gloves. Nodded. She took the second box. Heavy. She opened it. Old photo albums. Alyson froze for a second, staring at the cover of the top album. Then she closed the box and put it back. Not now. Later. The third box. Medium-sized, light. Alyson opened it and saw a folded winter sweater, her mother's. And under the sweater an envelope. Big, stiff, stamped, with the words, Peterson and Associates Notary Office. This was it. Alyson took out the envelope, put the box back into the wardrobe, and closed the door. She sat down on the edge of her mother's bed. The mattress sagged under her weight, the springs squeaking weakly. She opened the envelope. Inside were several documents. Alyson laid them out on the bed and went through them one by one. The first was a copy of the will. She skimmed the text. Legal language, dry and formal. I, Tom Hunt, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby bequeath. Then came the list of property. An apartment at the address, New York, Upper West Side, such and such building, such and such apartment. Beneficiary, Alyson Stoner, date of birth, ID details. Alyson stared at the name of the testator. Hunt. Tom Hunt. Her biological father. A man she had known nothing about until today. The second document was an appraisal of the apartment's value. Alyson looked at the numbers and felt a chill. The apartment was valued at $1,200,000. $1,200,000. Her breath caught. That couldn't be real. It was too much. Unreal. The third document listed the notary's contacts. The address of the office in New York, a phone number, and email. And a handwritten note, deadline to claim inheritance, November 15, 2023. Alyson checked the calendar on her phone. Today was October 23rd. Less than a month. She had less than a month to make a decision. And the last sheet. Separate, in a different handwriting. Large, clear letters, Barry Hunt, cardiologist, Boston. Below that, a phone number and an email address. A brother. Her half-brother. Alyson put all the documents back into the envelope, took it and the envelope with her mother's letter, and left the room. She went into the kitchen and grabbed her bag. Looked around at the gutted kitchen. Bare walls, stripped floor, piles of trash. She needed to keep cleaning, to finish what she'd started. But she had no strength left. None at all. She locked the apartment and went downstairs into the yard. It was already getting dark outside. Evening, 6 o'clock maybe. Or 7. Alyson didn't know and hadn't checked. She got into her old car and started the engine. It coughed and sputtered but finally turned over. Alyson sat behind the wheel, her hands resting on it, staring at nothing. Her head was a mess. She had to go home. She had to eat, shower, go to bed. Work tomorrow. Life went on. But how was she supposed to keep living when everything had flipped upside down? How do you go on knowing that everything you believed in turned out to be a lie? Not a malicious, selfish lie. A kind, protective lie meant to shield her. But still a lie. Alyson pulled out of the yard and drove home through the evening city, through traffic and stoplights, through crowds and street noise. She drove on autopilot, not thinking about the road, not seeing anything around her. At home she dropped her bag on the floor, went straight to the bathroom, and turned on the shower. She stood under the hot water until her skin turned red, until the hot stream ran out and icy water poured down instead. Only then did she step out, dry off, and pull on an old bathrobe. In the kitchen she made tea, though she didn't want to drink. She just held the hot mug in her hands, warming her cold fingers. Then she took the envelope with the letter out of her bag and read it again, slowly, carefully. She finished and realized she wasn't angry. She was supposed to be angry. Angry at her mom for lying, at Tom for not showing up earlier, at the whole world for being unfair. But there was no anger. Just a sad emptiness and a strange kind of understanding. Her mom had been afraid. Tom hadn't had the right. Gerald had loved her. Every one of them had done what they thought was right. Every one of them had been wrong in their own way and right in their own way. And now she, Alyson, had to decide what to do next. Take the inheritance or refuse it. Look for her brother or not. Forgive her mom or not. But not today. Today she would just finish her tea, go to bed, and try to pass out. She'd make a decision tomorrow. Or the day after. Or in a week. When she was ready. Alyson didn't sleep all night. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything she'd learned. The words from her mother's letter spun in her head like a broken record. Gerald is not your biological father. Tom left you an apartment. You have a half-brother. Every time she closed her eyes, images appeared. Her mom, young, 22, meeting a stranger in the library. Her dad, Gerald, proposing, knowing the truth. Tom, gray and stooped, sitting in a cafe across from her mom, saying, I know. Alyson tossed and turned, crushed the pillow, pulled the blanket over her head. Useless. Sleep wouldn't come. Her head was such a mess, so crowded with thoughts, there was no way to switch it off. Around 4 in the morning she gave up, got out of bed, and went to the kitchen. She made strong coffee. Normally she never drank coffee at night, but right now it didn't matter. She sat by the window, cupping the hot mug in both hands, and stared at the night city. The windows in the buildings across the street were dark, the streets empty. Only now and then a car drove by below, headlights sliding over the wet asphalt. It must have rained during the night. What now? That was the main question. What was she supposed to do with all this? Alyson tried to sort the situation into neat boxes like she always did when she had to solve a difficult problem. Logic. Facts. Order of actions. Fact 1, she had the right to an inheritance. An apartment in New York, worth $1,200,000. Money that could solve all of her problems at once. Pay off her loans, buy her own place, maybe even quit her job and finally do something she actually liked. Fact 2, the deadline to claim the inheritance was in 3 weeks. If she didn't go to the notary by November 15th, everything would be gone. The apartment would go to the state or to other heirs, if they appeared. Fact 3, there was Barry. A half-brother. Tom's son from his first marriage. He probably didn't know Alyson was his sister. Or did he? Her mom had written that Barry called her after Tom's death, asking who Alyson was. Did he know the truth? Fact 4, there was money on the card. How much? No idea. She needed to check. She needed to go to an ATM and see the balance. And fact 5, the most important one. Dad wasn't Dad. Or rather, Dad was still Dad, but biologically she was another man's child. A man she'd never seen, who died 2 years ago without ever meeting her. Alyson finished her coffee and set the mug in the sink. She looked at the clock. 4:30 in the morning. 3.5 hours until work. Maybe she could try to sleep? At least a little? She went back to the bedroom, lay down, closed her eyes. But sleep still wouldn't come. Her thoughts kept spinning, each heavier than the last. What if she refused the inheritance? Just didn't go to the notary, didn't submit any documents, and left everything as it was. She'd keep living her life like nothing had happened. Work, rented apartment, loans. The familiar, predictable life. But could she really live knowing there was an empty apartment in New York that was supposed to be hers? Knowing her biological father had wanted to leave her something, and she just ignored it? Knowing that somewhere in Boston lived her brother, whose existence she knew about but pretended she didn't? No. That wouldn't work. She couldn't pretend nothing had happened. You can't stuff the genie back into the bottle. By 7 in the morning, Alyson finally gave up. She got up, showered, got dressed. Called work and lied that she was sick. Fever, weakness, probably the flu. Her boss grumbled something displeased into the phone, but let her go. Alyson put her phone on silent so she wouldn't hear work messages and got herself together. Start small. Start with the card. She took the card she'd found in the envelope, slipped it into her wallet, and left the apartment. The nearest ATM was a 10-minute walk away, next to a mall. Alyson walked fast, almost running, afraid she'd change her mind. There was a line at the ATM. An old lady was withdrawing her pension, slowly putting the card in the wrong way over and over, grumbling at the machine. Alyson waited, shifting from foot to foot. Finally, the old woman finished, took her cash, and left. Alyson stepped up to the ATM and pulled out the card. Her hands were shaking. She slid it into the slot, entered the PIN, the 4 numbers written on the back, and pressed check balance. The screen blinked. A number appeared. $56,340. Alyson stared at the screen, not believing her eyes. She read it again. $56,340. Her knees went weak. She grabbed the side of the ATM to keep from falling. Her heart was pounding so loudly it felt like the whole street could hear it. 56,000. There were $56,000 on that card, money Tom had sent for her, and her mother had kept all these years without spending a cent. Alyson took the receipt the ATM spat out, folded it, and slipped it into her pocket. She pulled out the card, tucked it back into her wallet, stepped away from the machine on shaky legs, and sank onto the nearest bench. $56,000. That didn't solve everything, but it was a lot. A whole lot. She could pay off her loans, make a down payment on her own apartment, or just put it aside for a rainy day and breathe a little easier. But this money was from him. From Tom. From a man she'd never known. Did she have the right to take it? Alyson sat on the bench, staring at nothing, trying to sort out what she felt. What did she feel toward Tom? Gratitude? For what? For leaving her mom pregnant and disappearing? Anger? For what? For not knowing she existed? Curiosity? About a man who wasn't even alive? Nothing. She felt nothing. Tom was just a name on paper, a character in her mother's letter. An abstraction. She couldn't love him or hate him because she'd never known him. But her dad, Gerald, she loved him. Loved him honestly, with all her heart. He was her father, her real father, no matter what the DNA said. And no letter, no revelation could change that. Alyson pulled out her phone and called Piper. Her friend answered on the third ring, sounding half asleep. Hello? Alyson? Why are you calling so early? Piper, I need to talk to you. Right now? I have work in an hour. Right now. It's important. Really important. There was something in Alyson's voice that made Piper wake up instantly. Did something happen? Where are you? By the mall, on a bench. Can you come? 20 minutes. Stay there. Piper showed up in 15. She must have broken every speed limit on the way. She jumped out of her car without even turning off the engine and rushed to Alyson. What happened? You're pale as a ghost. Are you sick? Alyson silently handed her the envelope with the letter. Read it. Piper took the envelope, pulled out the letter, and began reading. Alyson watched her friend's face as it shifted, first confusion, then surprise, then shock. When Piper reached the end, she slowly lifted her eyes to Alyson. Holy shit, was all she said. Exactly. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Piper sat down beside her, still holding the letter. She read it again, slower this time. Over $1 million for the apartment, she murmured. And $56,000 on the card. Alyson, do you realize you're basically rich right now? I'm not rich. I don't even know if I have the right to take any of this. What do you mean you don't have the right? It was left to you. Officially. Through a notary. It's yours by law. But I didn't know him. This Tom. He was nobody to me. He was your father. Biologically. Not really. Piper fell silent, thinking. And what about the brother? This Barry guy? I don't know. I don't even know what I'd say to him. Hi, I'm your sister you never knew existed? Well, if your mom didn't lie in the letter, he knows about the will. That means he knows there's some Alyson his dad left an apartment to. Maybe he's already figured everything out. Or he hasn't. Or he has and he's furious. That apartment is expensive. He might have expected to inherit it. Then he would have contested the will. Maybe he did contest it. How would I know? Piper folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and handed it to Alyson. Okay, let's break this down. You have 3 weeks until the deadline for the inheritance. That's 1. You have $56,000 on that card, and you can use that money right now. That's 2. And you have your brother's contacts, you can reach out or not. Your choice. That's 3. Right? Alyson nodded. Right. So start with the easy part. Go to New York, to the notary. Find out what's going on with the will, if it's valid, if anyone contested it. And if everything checks out, file the paperwork. After that, you can decide what to do with the apartment, sell it, rent it, keep it. But first put it in your name, or you'll miss the deadline and lose everything. And what if I don't want to? Don't want what? Money? Oh, come on. I don't want any of this. This story, these secrets, this inheritance from a stranger. Piper took Alyson's hand. Alyson, I get that you're overwhelmed. Your mom died, you found out about your father and your brother. It's a lot. But the money is real. The apartment is real. You could pay off your debts, buy your own place, stop killing yourself at 2 jobs. Isn't that what you always dreamed of? I dreamed of it, yes. But not like this. Not because of someone else's secrets and someone else's death. The secrets are already out. The death's already happened. You can't change the past. But you can change your future. Alyson stayed quiet, letting Piper's words sink in. Piper was right. Of course she was. Turning down money out of some mysterious moral principle was stupid. A luxury she absolutely couldn't afford. Go to New York, Piper repeated. Today or tomorrow. Find out everything, then decide. And your job, forget the job for now. Tell them you're sick. Or take unpaid leave for a week or 2. Sort all this out and then come back. Alyson nodded. A decision was forming in her mind, slowly but steadily. Okay. I'll go. That's my girl. And about the brother, you can decide that later. Maybe you won't want to contact him. Or maybe he'll turn out to be a great guy and you two might actually get along. Time will tell. Piper wrapped an arm around Alyson's shoulders in a tight, friendly hug. It's going to be okay, Alyson. You'll see. Give it time, sort things out, and it'll get easier. I hope so. They sat a little longer in silence, just side by side, 2 friends on a bench by the mall early in the morning. Then Piper checked her watch and jumped up. Oh crap, I'm late for work. My boss is going to kill me. Alyson, seriously, don't disappear. Call me, text me. And most importantly, go to New York. Don't put it off. I will. Thanks, Piper. Anytime. You know I'm always here. Piper ran to her car, started it, and drove off, waving through the window. Alyson stayed alone. She sat back on the bench and pulled out her phone. Tickets. She needed to buy tickets to New York. She opened the airline website and checked the schedule. The nearest flight tonight at 8. Economy, $450. Expensive, but there was no way around it. Alyson bought the ticket, paying with her own card, not her mother's. She still couldn't bring herself to touch that money. The ticket arrived in her email. That was it. Bought. No turning back. She went home and packed a small bag. A couple of t-shirts, jeans, a jacket, documents, her passport, the envelope with her mother's letter, the envelope with the notary documents, the bank card. Everything essential. Then she lay down on the bed and finally fell asleep, heavy, restless sleep full of strange dreams. She dreamed of her dad, Gerald. He was sitting in the kitchen of her mother's apartment, smiling softly at her. "It's okay, sweetheart," he told her. "Don't be afraid." Then she dreamed of her mother, young and beautiful, wearing a blue dress. She stood by the window, staring into the distance. And outside that window stood a man Alyson didn't know, with gray eyes, watching her. Alyson woke up at 3 in the afternoon to the sound of her alarm. Her head hurt, and her mouth tasted awful. She got up, drank some water, ate a sandwich without appetite. Got dressed, grabbed her bag. 4 hours until the flight. Enough time to get to the airport without rushing. She called a taxi and reached the airport in 40 minutes. Checked in, dropped off her bag. She went into the waiting area, bought coffee from a vending machine, and sat in a hard plastic chair by the window. She watched people rushing around with suitcases, backpacks, kids. Everyone was in a hurry, everyone waiting for something. She pulled out her phone and mindlessly opened social media. Scrolled through her feed without reading anything. News, photos, posts. Then she opened the search bar and typed, "Barry Hunt, Boston, cardiologist." The search brought up several results. A LinkedIn page, a Facebook profile, an article from a medical clinic. Alyson opened the Facebook page. The profile photo showed a man around 50, maybe a bit younger. Gray hair, a neat beard, a serious face. Wearing a white medical coat with a stethoscope around his neck. His page was public. Alyson scrolled through the posts. Medical articles, conference pictures, family photos. A wife, 2 teenage kids. The ordinary life of an ordinary man. Her brother. A half-brother she hadn't known existed until yesterday. Alyson studied his photo for a long time, trying to find something familiar. Did he look like her? Like Tom? Hard to tell. He was just a man. Ordinary, middle-aged, intelligent-looking. Should she write to him? Right now? Introduce herself, explain everything? Or should she first deal with the inheritance, then think about family ties? Alyson closed the page without writing anything. Not now. New York first, the notary, the documents. Everything else later. Boarding for her flight was announced. Alyson grabbed her bag and headed to the gate. The plane was almost full. She found her seat by the window in the middle of the cabin, put her bag in the overhead bin, and sat down. The plane took off at exactly 8, down to the minute. The familiar landscape drifted past the window, city lights, then darkness, then clouds and stars. Alyson leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. In a few hours she would be in New York. Tomorrow a new life would start. Or the old life would continue, just with new circumstances. What did it matter? She closed her eyes, lulled by the hum of the engines. Her mind was still a mess, but not as heavy as before. The decision was made. The path had begun. There was no going back. The plane sped through the night, carrying her farther from her hometown, from her mother's apartment, from her old life. Toward New York, toward the inheritance, toward the unknown. Toward the truth that had been hiding under the linoleum for 30 years and had finally come out into the light. New York greeted Alyson with a gray, rainy morning. The plane landed at 7:30, and she stepped into the arrivals hall with a heavy bag and an even heavier head. She hadn't slept well. The seat was uncomfortable, her neighbors snored, and her thoughts wouldn't give her peace. The airport hit her with noise, crowds, and the smell of vending machine coffee. Alyson stopped in the middle of the hall, looking around in confusion. There were so many people. Everyone rushing, pushing, running to exits. And she just stood there, rooted to the spot, not knowing where to go. She needed a hotel. Or a hostel. Something cheap. Alyson pulled out her phone and opened a booking app. She checked the prices and felt her stomach drop. Even the cheapest hostel cost $80 a night. How many days would she need? 2? 3? A week? She did the math. She had about $800 left on her card. Last month's salary minus all expenses. The flight to New York had eaten $450. She needed the same amount for the return flight. That left almost nothing. If she paid $80 per night for a hostel, she'd have enough for 5 days. And that didn't include food, transport, anything else. Alyson stood in the middle of the airport, feeling panic rising. Maybe she shouldn't have come? Maybe she should have planned better, saved money first? But no. The inheritance deadline was in 3 weeks. She couldn't wait. She pulled herself together, walked outside, and got a taxi. She gave the driver the address of the notary office listed in the documents. He nodded, turned on the meter, and they drove. New York outside the window was huge, loud, alien. Wide avenues, towering buildings, endless traffic jams. People hurried past, not noticing each other. Alyson pressed her forehead to the cold glass and watched the city that was supposed to become part of her life, yet felt completely foreign. The taxi drove for about 40 minutes, weaving through the streets, getting stuck in traffic. The meter kept climbing mercilessly. When they finally stopped at the address, the fare was $65. Alyson paid, got out, and looked around. The notary office was in an old Manhattan building near the subway. A beautiful pre-war building with an elegant facade and a heavy door. A plaque by the door read, Peterson and Associates, Notary Public. Alyson pushed the door. Open. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor, found the right office, and knocked. Come in, a woman's voice called. Alyson stepped inside. The office was small but cozy. An old wooden desk, bookshelves up to the ceiling, a leather armchair. At the desk sat a woman around 55, with a neat short haircut and a tailored suit. Hello. How can I help you? Hello. Alyson hesitated, unsure where to begin. I'm Alyson Stoner. I was contacted 2 years ago about an inheritance from Tom Hunt. The notary studied her for a moment, then nodded. Please, have a seat. Do you have the documents with you? Alyson sat down in the chair across from the desk, took the envelope out of her bag, and handed it to the notary. The woman opened it, pulled out the documents, and began flipping through them. Let me see, she murmured, scanning the pages. Will from Hunt, Tom. Beneficiary Alyson Stoner, date of birth. Can you show me your ID, please? Alyson handed over her passport. The notary opened it, checked the details, and nodded. Everything checks out. You are indeed listed in the will as the beneficiary of the apartment on the Upper West Side, Building 342, Apartment 12B. Is the will still valid? Nobody contested it? The notary raised her eyebrows. Contested? No. Barry Hunt, the testator's son, did not contest it. He actually signed a consent for the property to be transferred to you. Though he did want to speak with you, he left his contact information. But you never came. Alyson felt a sharp sting of guilt. I didn't know. I only found out yesterday. My mother died a week ago, and I found the letter. She fell silent, unsure how much she should tell a stranger. But the notary seemed to understand anyway. I see, the woman said gently. These kinds of family matters can be complicated. What matters is that you're here now. The deadline to accept the inheritance is in 3 weeks, so you're right on time. What do I need to do? Fill out an application to accept the inheritance. I'll prepare the documents, you'll sign them, and in 6 months you'll receive a certificate of inheritance rights. After that, you can register the apartment in your name. 6 months? Alyson blinked. So I can't just take possession now? That's the law. 6 months from the date of the testator's death. Mr. Hunt passed away 2 years ago, but since you didn't appear at the time, the deadline was extended. Now you file the application, I open the case, and the countdown starts. In 6 months, the certificate. Alyson nodded, trying to process everything. And the apartment. What's happening with it now? What condition is it in? The apartment is sealed. After Mr. Hunt's death, nobody has entered it. I have the keys, I'm the custodian until it's officially transferred. Would you like to see it? I can. Of course. But first, let's complete the paperwork. The notary pulled up a blank form and began filling it out on her computer. Alyson watched her work, still barely believing this was happening to her. An apartment. In New York. In the center of the city. And it was hers. 15 minutes later, the document was ready. The notary printed it and handed it to Alyson. Read it carefully. If everything is correct, sign it. Alyson went through the text, full of legal terms and formal English. I hereby declare my acceptance of the inheritance following the death of Tom Hunt, deceased, consisting of an apartment located at. Everything was correct. She picked up the pen and signed at the bottom. Her hand trembled, the signature came out crooked. The notary took the document, stamped it, and signed it. Done. You are now officially the heir. In 6 months, come back for the certificate. I'll email you when everything is ready. Thank you. And now, if it's possible, could we go to the apartment? I'd like to see it. Of course. Let's go. It's not far, about 15 minutes by subway. Or we can take a taxi if you're tired. Subway is fine, Alyson said. I don't mind. They stepped outside. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still low and gray. The air smelled of damp concrete and city life. They went down into the subway, rode a few stops, and came out on the Upper West Side. The notary walked quickly and confidently, clearly knowing the route by heart. Alyson struggled to keep up, dragging her heavy bag. Did you know Tom Hunt? Alyson finally asked, gathering the courage to voice what had been haunting her all morning. I did. He was my client for many years. A good man, smart, well-educated. Worked as an art restorer. Spent his whole life repairing paintings. They used to say he had golden hands. Did he talk about me? The notary gave her a brief glance. He did. When he was preparing the will, he explained everything. Said he had a daughter he hadn't known about for a long time and wanted to leave her the apartment. Honestly, I assumed you two were aware of each other. When you didn't come for the inheritance, I was surprised. Then Barry told me you probably didn't know. It's a complicated story. Very complicated. They continued in silence for a while. Then the notary said, Don't blame yourself. And don't blame the deceased. People do what they can with the circumstances they're given. Your mother wanted to protect you. Tom wanted to help. Everyone acted with good intentions. But I still feel deceived. Like I lived my whole life inside a lie. You lived in love. Gerald loved you as his own. That's not a lie. That's as real as truth gets. Alyson didn't answer. The notary was right, but knowing that didn't make the weight any lighter. They reached a tall old building on a quiet street. It was a beautiful neighborhood, tree-lined sidewalks, elegant architecture. Nothing like the loud avenues of Midtown. The notary stopped in front of one of the buildings, old, pre-war, with dignified proportions and a handsome facade. Here we are, she said. Building 342. The apartment is on the 12th floor. They walked into the lobby. The door was heavy, with an intercom. Inside it was clean, with the faint smell of polish and fresh air. They took the elevator, an old one, but well-kept, lined with wood inside. On the 12th floor, the notary stopped at the door marked 12B. She pulled out a ring of keys, fiddled with the lock, and the door opened with a creak. Come in. Alyson stepped over the threshold and froze. The apartment greeted her with silence and the smell of stale air. A narrow hallway, walls painted light beige, oak parquet floors, cracked in places but solid and old. 2 bedrooms, kitchen, bathroom, the notary explained, opening the windows in the hallway. About 900 square feet. High ceilings, 10 feet. The building is from 1940, old, but sturdy. Last renovation was about 10 years ago. They walked into the first room. A large space with 2 windows facing the street. The room was furnished with old furniture, a floor-to-ceiling bookcase, a desk by the window, a sagging couch, an armchair. On the desk lay open books, art albums, brushes, paints. Alyson moved closer, running her hand over the dusty surface. A thick layer of dust clung to her fingers. She picked up one of the albums and opened it. Photographs of old paintings, religious scenes, saints, angels. Under each photo were handwritten notes, before restoration, after restoration. This was his work desk. Tom's. Her father's. He had sat here, worked here, stared out that window, thinking about his own life. Can I take this? Alyson asked, pointing to the album. The apartment is yours, the notary said. You can take whatever you want. Alyson put the album back. Not now. Later. They walked into the second room. Smaller, narrower, with 1 window. A bed stood in the corner under an old quilt, next to a wardrobe and a nightstand. On the nightstand was a framed photograph. Alyson picked it up. 2 people. A man and a woman. The man looked around 30s, light shirt, dark hair, gray eyes. The woman was a bit younger, blonde, smiling warmly. They were hugging, looking into the camera with happiness. Tom with his wife, the notary said quietly. Probably taken about 40 years ago. Alyson studied the man's face for a long time. Gray eyes like hers. His nose, her nose. Even the shape of his face was familiar. God. She really did look like him. Her throat tightened. Alyson put the frame back and turned away. The kitchen is over there, the notary said, pointing to a door at the end of the hallway. Would you like to see it? No. Thank you. I've seen enough. Alyson stepped out into the hallway and breathed in the fresh air drifting in through the open window. She needed to get out of this apartment, away from these walls, this furniture, these photos. The notary locked the door, and they went downstairs in silence. Outside, Alyson leaned against the building and closed her eyes. How are you feeling? The notary asked gently. I'm fine. Just a lot of emotions. I understand. It's not easy. But you'll handle it. Alyson nodded without opening her eyes. Do you want to take the keys with you, or leave them with me for now? I'll leave them with you. I don't know what I'm going to do with the apartment yet. I need to think. All right. When you get the inheritance certificate, you can come pick them up. Until then, the apartment will stay under my supervision. Thank you. You've helped me a lot. You're welcome. That's my job. The notary handed Alyson a business card. Here are my contacts. If you have questions, call or email anytime. Thank you. They said goodbye. The notary walked off toward the center of the city, and Alyson stayed where she was, staring up at the 12th floor windows. Behind those windows was the apartment. Her apartment. Worth over $1 million. 900 square feet in the heart of Manhattan. And inside was the life of a man she never knew, his things, his books, his memories. Her father. Alyson pulled out her phone and checked the time. 11:30. What now? Find a hotel? Wander around New York? Go home? No. Too early to leave. There was still something she needed to do. She opened her contacts and found the number for Barry Hunt, the one written in her mother's papers. She stared at the screen for a long moment, gathering courage. Then she typed a message. Hello, Barry. My name is Alyson. I'm the daughter of Hope Stoner. Your father left me an apartment in New York. I was at the notary today and learned that you know about me. Could we meet and talk? I understand how strange this sounds, but I'd like to explain everything. She reread the message 3 times. Then, before she could panic and delete it, she pressed send. The message went through. Delivered. That was it. No turning back. Alyson put the phone in her pocket and started walking down the street with no destination in mind, just moving, breathing New York air. Her phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Alyson froze, pulled it out. A new message from Barry Hunt. Hello, Alyson. I'm in New York today, passing through. Let's meet. At 3 o'clock near Central Park, at the Boathouse Cafe. It's close to my father's apartment. I'll be waiting. Alyson stared at the screen. Today. In 3 hours. She was going to meet her brother. Her half-brother, someone she hadn't even known existed 24 hours ago. God. What would she say? How would she explain? Where do you even start? But she had no choice. They had to meet. They had to talk. She needed to know what he thought about all of this. She typed a reply. All right. I'll be there at 3. Thank you. Sent. Now all she could do was wait. She found the nearest cafe, went inside, ordered a coffee and a sandwich. She sat by the window, watching the street, trying to calm her racing thoughts and pull herself together. In 3 hours, her life would change again. Or it wouldn't. Who knew? The only thing that mattered now was not to run. Not to panic. To finish what she had started. Alyson finished her coffee, paid, and stepped outside. She still had 2 hours before the meeting. She had to somehow get through them. For 2 hours she wandered through New York without really seeing it. She walked past streets lined with trees, past the park, past skyscrapers and old townhouses, past benches where moms with strollers and older people with books sat quietly. She ducked into a bookstore, flipped through a few titles without reading a word. Bought a bottle of water and drank it in one go, only then realizing how dry her throat had been. Time crawled painfully slow. Every time she checked her phone, only 5 minutes had passed. Alyson sat down on a bench near the park, took out her phone, and opened Barry's profile again. She studied his photo, looking for something familiar. Gray eyes like Tom's, like hers. A straight nose. The shape of his face. Yes, the resemblance was there. Undeniably. Her brother. Her older brother, about 50 now. He probably had a full-life family, career, routine. And now here she was, a stranger sister appearing out of nowhere wanting. What exactly? To meet? To explain? To apologize for taking the apartment their father had left her? The thought of the meeting made her skin go cold. What if he was angry? What if he thought she was some kind of fraud trying to steal part of the inheritance? What if he had already hired lawyers to challenge the will? But the notary said he'd signed the consent. So he wasn't angry. Or he was, but hiding it. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Alyson flinched and checked the screen. Piper. So? You made it? How's it going? Did you see the notary? Alyson typed quickly. I made it. Saw her. Everything's done. I'm on my way to meet my brother. Terrified. The reply came instantly. Your brother? Seriously? Alyson, are you sure? Maybe it's too soon? Too late. We already agreed. At 3. Oh my God. Okay. Hang in there. Text me after. I'm worried. Thanks. I'll try not to mess it up. Alyson put her phone away and checked the time. 20 to 3. Time to go. She got up, straightened her jacket, and ran her fingers through her hair, trying to make herself look halfway normal. She glanced at her reflection in a shop window. Pale face, dark circles, messy hair. She looked awful. But it was too late to fix anything. The Boathouse Cafe was easy to find. It sat right by the water, big glass windows overlooking the lake. Alyson pushed open the door and stepped inside. The cafe was half empty. Lunch hour had passed, dinner was still far off. Only 5 or 6 people sat scattered around. A waitress approached her with a menu. One person? No, I'm waiting for someone. A man. He should be here soon. All right, sit anywhere you like. I'll leave the menu. Alyson went to a table by the window and sat down, setting her bag on the chair beside her. She picked up the menu, but the words blurred. Her mind was blank, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure the whole cafe could hear it. The door opened. A man walked in. Tall, around 50, wearing a dark coat and a gray scarf. Gray hair, neat beard. Gray eyes. He looked around, and then his eyes landed on Alyson. They stared at each other for several seconds, still, silent, almost suspended in time. Then the man slowly walked toward her table. Alyson? Yes. Barry? That's me. He took off his coat, hung it on the back of the chair, and sat down across from her. The waitress approached immediately, but Barry waved her off. Later, please. Give us a few minutes. She nodded and walked away. They were alone. Barry studied Alyson carefully, not with hostility, but with curiosity, with quiet intensity. The way someone looks at something completely new, something unexpected. You look a lot like him, he said at last. Like our father. When I saw your picture online, I knew right away. The eyes, the nose, the shape of your face. It's all him. Alyson had no idea what to say. She just sat there staring at this stranger who was her brother. I didn't know, she finally whispered. Until yesterday, I didn't even know he existed. My mom. She kept silent all her life. I only found the letter after she died. I know, Barry said gently. Hope called me 2 years ago, after Dad died. She explained the situation. That's when I understood everything. You knew? Not at first. When Dad passed and I read the will, I was stunned. Some Alyson I'd never heard of gets the apartment. I found your mother's number in his things and called her. She told me everything. About their meeting in '79, about their relationship, about you. And you didn't contest the will? Barry shook his head. Why would I? Dad made it himself, fully aware. He wanted this. I have my own apartment in Boston, a good job, a family. I don't need another apartment in New York. But you. It seems you do. Alyson didn't know what to say. Shame burned inside her, shame for taking something that might have been his, shame for her mother's lifelong secrecy, shame for Tom's 2-month affair that changed everything for both families. I don't want to take what should be yours, she said quietly. If you think the apartment belongs to you, I'll refuse it. Barry gave a short, amused exhale. That would be noble. And completely unnecessary. The apartment is yours. Dad wanted that. Who am I to go against his wishes? But I didn't know him. Not once. Not ever. That's not your fault. And honestly, not his either. He didn't know you existed until recently. And when he finally found out, he tried to help. In his own way. Alyson nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. Tell me about him, she asked quietly. What was he like? I want to know. Barry leaned back in his chair, thinking for a moment. He was a complicated man. Kind, but very closed off. He dedicated his entire life to his work. Restoring paintings wasn't just a job for him, it was a calling. He could spend hours on one piece, bringing back details, returning life to what time had destroyed. He used to say there was something sacred about it, giving beauty back to something that had lost it. Barry paused. His eyes grew glossy. He swallowed hard and went on. He loved my mom. She died of cancer 15 years ago. And he never really recovered after that. Became even more withdrawn, buried himself in work. I tried to pull him out of it, invited him to Boston, suggested trips. But he always refused. Said he was fine alone. And about me. Did he ever talk about me? No. Never. I only found out about you after he died, from the will. But now, seeing you, I understand he thought about you. Otherwise, why leave the apartment? That was his way of redemption, I guess. For not being there. Alyson wiped her tears with the back of her hand. My mom wrote that he transferred money to her. Every month. For years. She didn't spend a cent saved at all. There's over $50,000 on the card. Barry nodded. I know. He never told me, but when I saw his bank statements after he died, there were regular transfers to Hope Stoner. I didn't understand it then, thought he was helping an old friend. But now everything makes sense. The waitress approached again, and this time Barry ordered a coffee. Alyson asked for tea. They sat quietly while she prepared the drinks. When the waitress left, Barry spoke again. I'm not angry at you, Alyson. And I'm not angry at him. Life is messy. People meet, drift apart, make mistakes. What matters is that he was a good father to me. And the fact that he had another daughter I didn't know about. Well, now I know. So you consider me your sister? Barry looked at her closely. Do you want me to? Alyson hesitated. Did she? A week ago she didn't have a brother. Her whole small world consisted of her job, her rented apartment, her loneliness. And now here sat a stranger who happened to share her blood, asking if she wanted him as family. I don't know, she admitted. Everything is happening too fast. Too much at once. I need time to process it. I understand. I needed time too. I've known about you for 2 years and couldn't get myself to reach out. I thought maybe you wouldn't want to talk, that I'd just be a stranger to you. But then you wrote to me, and I thought, maybe that's a sign. The notary said you wanted to talk to me. I did. I wanted to know if you knew the truth. I wanted to tell you about Dad, show you his work. But you never came for the inheritance, and I realized you probably had no idea. And then your mother passed, and I decided to wait. Grief, funerals. It wasn't the right moment. And now you're in New York just for the day? Yeah, a conference. I'm a cardiologist, I work at a hospital in Boston. Every few months I come to conferences, seminars. Today is the last day. Fate, Alyson murmured. For the first time since the beginning of their conversation, Barry smiled. Maybe. I'm not big on fate, but sometimes coincidences are too strange to be random. They finished their drinks. Barry checked his watch. I need to head to the airport in a couple of hours. But I have something for you. He took a large envelope out of his bag and handed it to Alyson. These are Dad's photos. His work, family pictures, some documents. I gathered everything from the apartment after he died and wanted you to have it. I thought you'd want to see. Alyson took the envelope and opened it. There were about 20 photographs inside. She pulled out the first one. Tom, young, maybe 30, standing by an easel with a paintbrush in hand. Smiling at the camera. Handsome, open expression, kind eyes. The second photo's Tom older, around 40, with a little boy on his shoulders. The boy was laughing, Tom was holding his legs and smiling just as brightly. That's me, Barry said, pointing to the boy. I was about 5. We were at our summer place. Alyson flipped through the photos, studying the face of the father she had never known. There he was at work, in a museum, wearing a white coat, bent over a painting. There he was on a fishing trip. There he was with his wife, holding her close, kissing her temple. There he was old, gray-haired, but with the same gentle look in his eyes. Thank you, Alyson whispered, trying not to cry. It means a lot. You're welcome. He was your father. You deserve to know who he was. Alyson put the photos back in the envelope and held it to her chest. Would you mind if I texted you sometimes? Asked about him, about your family? I don't want to intrude, but I'd like to know more. Barry smiled softly. Of course I don't mind. Write anytime. Call. Come to Boston if you want. I have a wife and 2 kids. Your nephews, technically. I think they'll be excited to know they suddenly have an aunt. They know about me? They do. I told them 2 years ago, when I found out. I said Grandpa had a daughter from before, whom we never knew about. They took it surprisingly well. Kids today are more open-minded. Alyson nodded, feeling the tension that had been sitting inside her the whole meeting finally loosen. Barry turned out to be a good man. He wasn't angry, didn't blame her, didn't demand anything. He just accepted things as they were. They talked a little more about life, work, plans. Barry told her he'd been a cardiologist for 25 years, that he loved his job though it was tough. That his wife was a university professor, that his kids were in school. That they had a summer house outside the city where they spent weekends in July. Alyson told him about herself, about the job she hated, the divorce 3 years ago, the way she lived alone and wasn't very happy. The words came easily, flowing as if they had known each other for years. When it was time to say goodbye, Barry stood up and put on his coat. Alyson, I'm really glad we met. Truly. And I hope this isn't the last time. I hope so too. They hugged awkwardly but warmly, the way family hugs when they're still getting used to the idea of being family. Barry patted her shoulder. Take care of yourself. Handle the apartment, decide what you want to do with it. If you need help or advice, call me. I'm always available. Thank you. For everything. Barry left the cafe. Alyson stayed sitting for a moment, watching him go. Then she looked down at the envelope full of photos lying on the table in front of her. She had a brother. An older brother who accepted her, didn't judge her, didn't turn away. She had family, unexpected, unfamiliar, but family. Alyson paid for the drinks, grabbed her bag and the envelope, and stepped outside. The air was cool, wind tugging at her hair. She walked toward the water and sat on the same bench where she'd waited 2 hours ago. She pulled out her phone and texted Piper. The meeting went well. Barry turned out to be great. He's not angry, not blaming me. He gave me photos of Dad. I'm glad I went. The reply came fast. That's amazing. I'm happy for you, Alyson. And now what? When are you coming home? Alyson hesitated. When was she going home? She needed to find a place to stay the night, then maybe go back tomorrow. Or the day after. Or stay longer. Walk around New York, see the city, visit the Upper West Side apartment again calmly, alone, without the notary, and really look at everything. She typed. Not sure yet. Maybe I'll stay a couple of days. Need to sort things out. I'll find a cheap hostel for the night. Do it. And take care of yourself. Text me, don't disappear. Promise. Alyson put her phone away and opened the envelope again. She pulled out the photos and looked at them one by one, slowly, carefully. Here he was young, here older, here old. Smiling, serious, thoughtful. Each photo held a piece of his life she never knew. A life she could have known if her mother had told her the truth, if Tom hadn't left in '79, if fate had twisted differently. But fate twisted the way it did. And now Alyson sat on a bench in New York, looking at pictures of a man she never met, feeling a strange mix of sadness and gratitude. Sadness for what she never had. Gratitude for what she had now: the apartment, the money, the brother, the photos, the history. More than she ever expected. Much more. Alyson slipped the photos back into the envelope, stood up, and walked along the water. She needed to find a hostel, settle in, rest. Tomorrow was another day. Tomorrow she would visit the apartment again, not as a visitor, but as the owner. She'd look at everything slowly, carefully. Figure out her next steps. Tonight she would just walk through New York, breathe the evening air, try to make sense of everything that had happened in the last 2 days. Her life had changed completely, irreversibly. She didn't yet know if it was for better or worse. But she did know one thing: there was no going back. Only forward. She found a hostel quickly through the app. Cheap, close to the subway. A 6-bedroom, but by evening there were only 2 people, her and a young Asian girl who didn't speak English and only smiled shyly in response to Alyson's greeting. Perfect roommate. Alyson dropped her bag on the bunk, showered in the shared bathroom, changed into clean clothes, and finally felt human again. The hostel was warm, clean, smelling of freshly washed sheets. After everything that had happened, it felt like heaven. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and pulled out the photos again. She studied them under the dim bedside lamp, trying to find pieces of herself in Tom's face. The nose? Maybe. The shape of the eyes? Possibly. The mouth? No, that was her mother's. Dad, she whispered, testing the word on her tongue. It sounded strange. Dad had always been Gerald's gentle, quiet, steady. He'd raised her, played with her, taught her to ride a bike, walked her to first grade. He was her real father, even without shared blood. And Tom? What was he? A biological father, but a stranger. A man she'd never known. A man who didn't know she existed until the very end of his life. Alyson slipped the photos back into the envelope and closed her eyes. Her head was heavy with exhaustion and information. Too much in 2 days. Too many emotions. Too many revelations. Her dreams were jumbled and strange. Her mother's apartment with impossibly high ceilings fading into darkness. Bare concrete floors with linoleum, but when she lifted it, underneath weren't newspapers but old letters, yellowed and written in ink. She tried to read them, but the letters blurred into nonsense. Then she stood in another apartment bright, with tall windows and parquet floors. A thin man with gray hair and glasses sat in front of her. He looked at her and smiled. "I've been waiting for you," he said. "For so long." "Why didn't you tell my mother?" she asked. "Why didn't you come?" "I didn't know how," he answered sadly. It was all too complicated. And suddenly he started to dissolve like smoke, disappearing, and Alyson reached out to grab him, but her hands closed on air. She woke up with her heart pounding. The room was dark, her roommate snoring softly. Alyson grabbed her phone. 5 a.m. Too early to get up, but she couldn't fall back asleep. She lay there for a while, then quietly got dressed and left the hostel. Outside, the city was cold and nearly empty. A few early risers hurried down the sidewalks, cars hissed across the wet asphalt. Gray clouds hung low, threatening rain. Alyson wandered aimlessly, breathing in the morning air as the city slowly woke. She passed Cheddar Chops, 24-hour cafes smelling of fresh pastries, sleepy workers sweeping the sidewalks. Half an hour later, she reached the park. She sat on a bench under the bare trees and watched the sunrise climb over the city. Alyson pulled out her phone and dialed Piper. Rings. 1, 2, 3. "Hello?" Piper's sleepy voice. "Alyson, what's going on? Do you know what time it is?" "Sorry I woke you. I couldn't sleep." "It's okay." Piper yawned. "What happened? Are you all right?" "Yeah. I don't know." "Piper, I'm sitting in a park in New York, watching the sunrise, and wondering what I'm even doing." "You mean in general? Or right this second?" "Both." Piper was quiet for a moment, then said, "Listen, how about I come to you? I'll take a day off, hop on a plane, and come. Moral support. Everything's easier when you're not alone." Alyson felt her throat tighten. "Seriously? You can do that?" "Of course. I've got 2 unused days off. My boss won't say no if I ask. I can fly out tonight and be in New York tomorrow morning." "Where are you staying?" "In a hostel in Manhattan." "Perfect. I'll call you when I get the tickets." "Hang in there, Alyson." "Thank you, Piper. You're the best." "I know," her friend snorted. "Now go get some coffee. Eat something. Stop suffering by yourself." They said goodbye. Alyson put her phone away and felt a little lighter. Piper was coming. She wouldn't be alone. She had someone to lean on. She got up from the bench and went looking for a cafe. She found a small one near the subway, already open. She ordered a cappuccino and a croissant, then sat by the window and watched as more and more people filled the street. New York was waking up. The city was sliding into its usual rhythm. People rushing to work, packed buses, honking traffic. A huge, indifferent city where she was just a tiny speck. But that tiny speck now had an apartment in the center. An inheritance. A past she never knew. And a future she still had to figure out. Alyson finished her coffee and pulled out her phone again. She found the notary's contact and typed, "Hello. This is Alyson Stoner. I'd like to come to the apartment today and look around more carefully. What time works for you?" The reply came 10 minutes later. "Good afternoon, Alyson. I'll be free from 2 p.m. Let's meet at the apartment. I'll bring the documents that need signing." "Perfect. Thank you. See you." Alyson put the phone away and checked the time. 8 in the morning. 6 whole hours until 2. What now? She could walk around the city. Visit a park, a museum, just wander the streets. New York was big, interesting, full of things to see. Or she could go back to the hostel and sleep for a couple more hours. She was exhausted. Or Alyson suddenly remembered the cemetery where Tom was buried. Barry had said yesterday that their father was in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. Not too far, easy to reach by subway. Should she go? She hesitated. Why would she go to a cemetery? She didn't know this man. To her, he was a stranger. The photos in the envelope were just papers, faces she'd never seen in real life. But he was still her biological father. The man whose blood ran in her veins. The man who left her an apartment, money, a piece of his life. The man who might have thought about her before he died, maybe even regretted never meeting her. Alyson stood up, paid for her breakfast, and walked out. She took the subway to Brooklyn, got off, and asked a passerby how to get to Greenwood. They pointed the way. The cemetery greeted her with silence and rows of gravestones. Old, spacious, with tall trees and narrow paths carpeted in fallen leaves. Alyson stopped at the entrance, unsure of where to go. She approached a woman in the small office by the gate and asked, "Excuse me, how can I find Tom Hunt's grave? He's buried somewhere here." The woman checked her computer, then looked up. "Section 12, row 8. Go straight and then left. You'll see the marker." "Thank you." Alyson walked down the path, passing stone after stone, old, new, modest, lavish. Some had fresh flowers, others had photographs. Faces looked back at her, young, old, smiling, stern. All of them people who once lived. Now only names carved in stone. Section 12, row 8. Alyson stopped in front of a gray granite headstone. Simple, clean. The inscription read, "Tom Hunt, 1951 to 2023. Artist, restorer, father." There was a photo set into the stone. The same one she'd seen in the envelope. Tom with glasses, serious, with a faint smile. Alyson stood there, unsure what to feel. Sadness? But how do you grieve for someone you never knew? Guilt? But what was she guilty of? She didn't even know he existed. She simply stood, looking at the stone. "Hi," she said quietly. "I'm Alyson. Your daughter. We never got to meet." The words sounded foolish, awkward. She was talking to a piece of granite that couldn't answer. But for some reason, she needed to say it. "Thank you for the apartment. And the money. It's a lot. I don't know why you did it. Maybe guilt. Maybe duty. Maybe you really wanted to help. I don't know." She closed her mouth. The wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a crow croaked. "Mom never told me about you. I only found out yesterday. And I'm not angry at her. She did what she thought was right. She raised me alone. Well, with Gerald. He was a good father. I loved him." Tears suddenly welled up. Alyson brushed them away. "But you're my father too. By blood. And I wish I could have known you. Known what kind of person you were. What you loved, what you dreamed about. It's a shame we never got the chance." She stood there for a little longer, then leaned down and rested her hand on the cold granite. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." By the time Alyson left the cemetery, it was almost noon. She felt lighter, as if part of the weight she'd been carrying had finally slipped off her shoulders. She had come, seen, spoken. Now she could move forward. She took the subway back to the hostel. She needed to grab her things, take the documents, and get ready to meet the notary at 2. Alyson stood again in front of the familiar building on the Upper West Side. The day was gray, a light drizzle misting the air. She pulled her collar up against the wind and shivered. The notary arrived 5 minutes later, tall, in a strict coat, a leather portfolio in hand. She gave Alyson a nod. "Good afternoon. Punctuality is good. Let's go, I've prepared everything." They rode up to the 12th floor. The notary took out the keys and unlocked the door. The apartment greeted them with silence and the scent of old wood. "Come in, don't be shy," she said, switching on the lights. "Here are the documents for the apartment: certificate of ownership, technical passport, proof of no liens. Everything's clean, no debts, no issues. The apartment is fully yours." Alyson took the folder, flipping through it. Stamps, signatures, legal language. It all felt unreal. "And here," the notary continued, "are the banking details for the account holding the money. $56,340. You can withdraw at any time or leave it in the account. I've already reissued the card in your name, here it is." She handed Alyson a bank card. Alyson turned it over in her hands. Just an ordinary piece of plastic. Yet it held over $50,000. "You'll need to sign here, here, and here," the notary said, pointing at the documents. "It confirms you accepted the inheritance and have no objections to the paperwork." Alyson signed. Her hand trembled, the letters came out uneven, but it was her signature, official and real. "Excellent," the notary nodded, gathering the papers. "The apartment is officially yours now. Congratulations. If you have questions, call anytime." She shook Alyson's hand, picked up her portfolio, and left, leaving Alyson alone in the apartment. Alyson stood in the hallway, holding the folder, unable to believe any of this was real. The apartment. Her apartment. She wandered through the room slowly, with no notary hovering behind her, taking her time. She looked at everything carefully. Books on the shelves, art history, classics, modern novels. Paintings on the walls, mostly impressionist prints, plus one original landscape in oils. Furniture's solid, good quality, not old. On the desk stood a framed photograph. Tom with a woman and a little boy. A family. Wife, son. Barry was tiny in the picture, maybe 3 or 4. All 3 of them were smiling. Alyson picked up the frame, studying it. Tom's wife was beautiful, dark hair, intelligent eyes, a warm face. Barry, the blonde toddler with round cheeks. And Tom? Young, happy, not a trace of gray. This had been his life. His real family. Her mother had just been a moment, a mistake of youth he might have regretted. Or maybe remembered with tenderness. Who knew? Alyson set the frame back down and walked into the kitchen. She opened the fridge, empty, unplugged. The cupboards held dishes, cups, pots. Everything clean and neatly arranged. She sat at the kitchen table, set the documents in front of her, and took out her phone. She texted Piper. Signed everything. The apartment is mine. Still doesn't feel real. The reply came instantly. Congrats, landlady. I'm on the plane, I'll be there tomorrow at 7 a.m. Meet you at the hostel? Deal. I'll be waiting. Alyson put away her phone and looked around. What now? Live here? Sell it? Rent it? She didn't want to move to New York. Her life was in her home cities, her job, her friends, her routine. Moving here and starting from scratch felt overwhelming. Sell it? She could. An apartment in the center of Manhattan was worth a fortune. This size, this location, she could get over $1 million easily. Enough to buy herself a good place back home, with plenty left over. Or rent it out. A steady monthly income, without giving up the property. Also an option. Alyson stood and walked through the apartment again. She stopped at the living room window, looking down. Streets, trees, people with umbrellas. A beautiful view, a beautiful neighborhood. She thought about her mother's apartment, the small 2-bedroom in an old building on the edge of town where her whole childhood took place. Cramped rooms, low ceilings, peeling wallpaper. How her mother had dreamed of something better all her life and never got it. And now Alyson had an apartment in the heart of New York City. Something people spend their whole lives dreaming about. She received it for free from a man she'd never known. Unfair? Maybe. But life is rarely fair. Alyson pulled out her phone and dialed a realtor a coworker had once recommended. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Alyson. I'd like a consultation about selling an apartment in New York. Hello. I'm listening. Upper West Side, roughly 900 square feet, good condition. I'd like to know how much it could be worth. The realtor named an estimate $1,200,000, maybe more if a buyer came quickly with no haggling. $1,200,000 plus $56,000 in the account. Nearly $1,300,000. A sum she couldn't earn in 10 years of work. All right, Alyson said. I'll think about it and call you back. Thank you. She hung up and sank onto the couch. Soft, comfortable, leather. She leaned back, closed her eyes. If she sold the apartment, she could change her life completely. Buy her own place, quit the job she hated, finally do something she dreamed about for years. Study, travel. Live, not just survive, but actually live. Her mother had worked her whole life. Up at 6, out the door before sunrise, home late and exhausted. Saving every penny, sacrificing everything. And she died at 62, never seeing anything beyond her tiny apartment and her job. Alyson didn't want that life. She didn't want to waste her years on something that didn't bring her joy. And now she had a chance. A chance given to her by a man she had never known. Her biological father, who maybe had felt guilty for not being there. Thank you, Dad, she thought, speaking to someone who was no longer alive. Alyson got up from the couch and went to the bedroom. She opened the closet. Tom's clothes hung there. Shirts, jackets, coats. Everything neat, clean. It still smelled like his cologne, light, warm, familiar even though it wasn't. On the shelf were boxes. Alyson took one down and opened it. Letters. Old, yellowed, tied with a ribbon. She untied the knot and pulled out one envelope. My love, I miss you so much. A letter from his wife, written years ago while Tom was away on a work trip. Alyson read it and felt like she was intruding on someone else's life. But she couldn't stop. The letters were full of love, tenderness, quiet, everyday affection. His wife wrote about their son, their home, how much she was waiting for him to return. Tom had been loved. He had a family that waited for him. Alyson placed the letters back in the box and retied the ribbon. This wasn't her story. It belonged to another family, another life. She closed the box, put it back on the shelf, and shut the closet. It was time to go. Time to return to the hostel, wait for Piper, figure out what came next. Alyson grabbed the documents, her bag, and gave the apartment one last look. It stayed silent, keeping its secrets. Goodbye, she whispered, and stepped out, locking the door behind her. Outside, the rain had grown stronger. Alyson opened her umbrella and walked toward the subway. She moved slowly, unhurried, thinking about everything that had happened over the past 2 days. Her mother had died, and with her death came a secret she'd carried her whole life. Alyson learned about a father she'd never met. She received an apartment, money, a brother. Her world had flipped, and nothing would ever be the same. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time, like standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an unknown depth. Do you step forward or retreat? Alyson knew she would step forward. Because there was no going back. Only forward. She went down into the subway, got into a train, and headed back to the hostel. Tomorrow Piper would arrive, and together they would figure out the next steps. But today Alyson was simply tired. Tired of thinking, tired of feeling, tired of sorting through everything. Today she wanted only one thing: to crawl into bed, close her eyes, and sleep. And wake up tomorrow with a clear head and new strength. Tomorrow, a new life would begin. But that would be tomorrow. Today she just needed rest. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you new, captivating stories every day. You can already find our next story on the main page. We wish you all the very best and true happiness in your life.